discussion as volunteers help our organizations to build capacity and deliver programming that is essential for the community. So before I begin with the next slide, we would like to poll the audience by asking them a question. So if Adriana, if you could put the poll up, that would be great.
So for the first question, everyone, by the way, we asked you, have you engaged with your volunteers virtually? And so 59% or 16 of you said yes, now going up to 61%, and almost 40% answered no.
That's good to know. Thank you, Adriana. Okay. All right. So basically what I want to do is just share some context around what Wood Green does and what we've done virtually with volunteers. So currently, out of 908 volunteers, we currently have 756 volunteers who've supported 13 different program areas. Within these program areas, we've also engaged 70% of them online. I just wanted to highlight here as well that there's 3 program areas that highly use volunteers. And the 3 that I wanted to mention, first of all, was the first one is Community Connections, which is basically a program that uses volunteers from different professional sectors to support internationally trained professionals through mentorship, customized workshops, and as well as through mentoring and networking events. The other program that uses volunteers on a skills-based spectrum is also the Financial Impairment and Tax Clinic. So mainly they use skills-based volunteers who have high experience with technology as well as with computer skills, and also are familiar with the basic tax laws within the Canadian context. In addition to that, as part of Wood Green, so with the support of the community that we have of volunteers, we're able to support about 37,000 clients per year. So if you can just move to the next slide. Thank you. So for some reason, apologies here, I have my notes and they've disappeared on me. So I guess what I'll just do is I'm just going to talk about what we have here in regards to lessons learned. What's happened is through our conversations with the volunteers and discussions through the program coordinators from several program areas, we've learned many things about volunteers starting from March 2020. The first one I'd like to bring up is a lack of tech literacy, the fear of using literacy, and the access in regards to that. And so many of the volunteers talk about their, how they're uncomfortable with using technology, how they're fearful of, pressing the wrong button if they're going to be presenting or supporting our clients. And some of them have also talked about their access to technology, so not having, proper Wi-Fi where they're located in their homes. So that's been one of the lessons that we've learned through talking to the volunteers. The other piece is privacy concerns. And so really with privacy concerns, it's they feel that, they're being watched, that we can get access to their personal information, that there's many things in regards to somebody seeing into their house. And I think that that's really a valid reason for them to feel that way. And so many of them have chosen, not to volunteer due to the privacy concerns. And as well as another reason why some volunteers have decided not to continue volunteering with some of our programs is due to COVID and screen fatigue. So as we know, many of the volunteers who work full-time jobs and also have to care for their children at the same time are fatigued due to the increase of stress and are fatigued due to the increase of being online constantly. And And I think that that's really important for us to take into consideration, as we all are on this call as well. So and the last point that I'd like to bring up is in regards to the mental health and the mental state of many of the volunteers. So really what it is that many of them are impacted by the stress or the isolation of being alone and not being supported or having any family around them. And also talking about some of them support elderly parents. And so that also takes a strain on their ability to volunteer with us. So I believe before the next slide, there's a polling question that I wanted to poll the audience with.
So I have launched the poll, everyone, so you are able to see the question: what online communication tools does your organization use? And it's a multiple choice one. So most of you have answered that you use Microsoft Teams, followed by Zoom and WebEx. And we have already 90% of all of you voting. So I'm just gonna go ahead and share the results with everyone.
That's great. A lot of organizations use Zoom, which I think is a really great tool. Currently, Wood Green can only utilize MS Teams, so the features are quite different and can be limiting compared to how Zoom is utilized. Okay. So Jesse, if you can move to the next slide for me. Oh,
sorry, just gonna try this again.
it's okay. Perfect, thank you. So, so what I want to do next was just basically address the lessons learned that Mason and I have collected regards to information through focus groups, discussions, as well as surveys. And so these are some of the solutions that we've provided to the volunteers so that they feel at ease and more comfortable, and as well as really truly supported throughout their journey with virtual volunteering. Some of the solutions we provided are really one-on-one meetings to discuss with the volunteers what challenges they're facing and even what successes they can bring forward. We've provided group training sessions basically related to the use of technology. So showing them features to protect their privacy, such as utilizing the background gallery, and ensuring that we encourage program areas to really recognize volunteer efforts through fun and engaging activities, which in turn create a supportive volunteer community. So now I will give the floor to Mesam to continue with the presentation and share in further detail the resources that we use to provide solutions to volunteers. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian, for this presentation. and for this introduction about Wood Green volunteers. I would like to talk a bit about the resources we are using. So we were able to move from all in-person training sessions into virtual sessions through different methods. So one of it was utilizing the LinkedIn Learning platform, because during the pandemic, we moved everything in person, even the training sessions, into virtual and remote sessions using MS Teams, LinkedIn Learning, and other platforms. Wood Green has has a partnership, with LinkedIn, and we have almost 2,000 licenses to give access to volunteers and clients into this learning platform. The volunteer services alone has assigned about 250 licenses to volunteers and students. In this platform, they get access into orientation package, which was created by Wood Green. We included in this package videos and uploaded multiple learning materials about the services we provide, including the code of conduct policies, COVID-19 policies, and AODA training. Now, all new volunteers are added immediately after completing their registration process. And also the volunteers and students have access into more than 15,000 learning courses on LinkedIn Learning, knowing that we are recommending also digital literacy courses through this platform, like the MS Office. I want to move to the next point here about the volunteer community newsletter and the testimonials. As part of our communication plan in Wood Green and volunteer services, we are working on advocating for our role in the organization and the volunteers' impact in the community. What we already started with is publishing the testimonials and success stories of prominent volunteers on our website and the LinkedIn page, in addition to other social media channels, after for sure getting their consents to share their photos. But to go ahead with the plan, we are working right now on creating a volunteer community where they will be able to share their thoughts, participate in discussions, and join different activities. Moreover, an online newsletter will be created to recognize the hard work of our volunteers and to share important moments of volunteers in action. Actually, these ideas came out during various focus group discussions and meetings, in addition to the surveys and online workshops. Now, before moving to the next slide, I would like to poll the audience about the volunteer engagement opportunities. So, can you please, Adriana? Okay, so
So
okay.
I just launched the next poll. So how do you keep your volunteers engaged in your programs?
And please, if you can add your comments in the chat box about if you have any other option and not existing here in the list.
So most of you are saying that you keep them engaged through meetings, followed by other, and trainings as well. So we are at 78% of the votes for this poll. I'm just going to give it a few more seconds before I end it and share it.
Thanks.
And there's a comment in the chat area letting us know that the Together project, they connect with their volunteers through instant messaging platforms. So I'm just going to go ahead and end it and share the result.
Interesting. I see 79% engaging the volunteers through meetings, then trainings. Sound good? Okay. Thanks, Adriana. So if we can move to the next slide, please. Okay, so I will give you some information about volunteer engagement opportunities we are providing at Wood Green. So if we are talking about increasing the volunteer engagement, not travel required, during the pandemic, more volunteers were showing interest in different opportunities, especially the virtual ones. They found it easier to volunteer at the ease of their home and to help their community without spending time in commuting. That's why we see the number of active volunteers hasn't decreased so much post-COVID. I'm referring to the first slide presented by Adrian. It's only like we still have 70% of volunteers are still active. Also, there was an opportunity to pilot new programs and ideas. This is in the second point we are talking here. For example, Wood Green Tax Clinic has initiated the Do It Yourself program for volunteers to help clients file their own taxes. Also, we transitioned the friendly visitors into friendly callers to check in on the seniors more regularly. And I need to highlight the walking counseling clinic work. It was smoothly converted all its services to be virtual and to serve clients remotely. I need to mention here that throughout the transition process, we found that different age groups have their challenges and successes. For example, seniors are more into doing friendly calling more than any other programs, while walk-in counseling have youth volunteers mostly being more tech savvy and comfortable in using technology. However, program coordinators are always supporting volunteer services to encourage their volunteers to learn and educate themselves with technology to go with the flow of transition. I want to talk about the cross-pollination of volunteers as well. It was a good opportunity for the volunteers who had more free time and wanted to join multiple programs to give back to the community and for sure to get more experience in different areas. So various opportunities are always shared with our current volunteers registered in our pool, and they got to participate in different activities across the organization. The last point is investing and engaging in skilled volunteers. This point is very important because as we are having a pool of skilled volunteer professionals, we tend to invest their skills in various areas across the organization, like having them as facilitators for specific workshops or inviting them to be guest speakers to share their experiences and accomplishments with their peer volunteers and with the clients. Now, before moving to the next slide, please, Adriana, if we can go to the next polling.
So for the last one, we have the question, have you created COVID-19 policies for your volunteers? So most of you answered yes, and I'm going to go ahead and end the poll now and share the results.
Wonderful. That's amazing. So I see 65% said yes, which is great. Okay. So if we can move to the next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so now this is the last slide. We'll be talking about the virtual best practices of Wood Green Volunteer Services. So this cycle explains the practices we have implemented to move from in-person into virtual work. First thing we do is the virtual screening process. as we have transitioned from paper-based process into a complete electronic one. Many changes were considered, including having e-signatures and accepting email consents. This brings me to the next step in the cycle, which is having the needed policies and procedures available on LinkedIn Learning. As I said before, we have uploaded our main policies like the code of conduct and COVID-19 policies into the LinkedIn Learning platform, and volunteers have to sign them after completely reading them. In addition to that, we made our policies fillable for electronic signature, like the confidentiality, commitment, and usage of personal technology tools, like the phone and laptop. I just want to highlight that the COVID policies were adjusted to apply to volunteer services in alignment with the staff policies issued by Wood Green. The last step I want to talk about is the volunteer software VCs or volunteer system, we name it like that. This software it became more usable during COVID as more profiles were created for program coordinators to enable them track their volunteer hours and assign shifts for them. Moreover, volunteer records became more accurate as they all now have to fill an online application on Visas to complete their registration process before being volunteers with Wood Green. And their profiles are set and linked to the programs they are volunteering in. Also, they can use Visas to sign up for their shifts. And that's why we are trying to be more, to streamline the process in more systematic way. The fourth step is the volunteer reporting. In this step, I can refer to Visas as well. It's been the main source for generating reports about active volunteers and the hour they are contributing with to the organization. Starting from there, we can focus on the volunteer performance evaluation and monitor the programs accordingly. The last step in this cycle is the volunteer education. We are now drawing our attention into online education, of the volunteers through online sessions, workshops, and focus group discussions. This is a way to keep our volunteers engaged, to address their problem of being isolated and disconnected from the organization they are volunteering in, because we know that when having the in-person activities, it's more engaging, but when we are transitioning into the online, it's a bit isolating. Also, it's important to always get new ideas from the volunteers on how to improve the programs, what are the challenges they are facing, and what kind of solutions they are suggesting. This will, I think, this will make them decision makers, and it's a very like they are a very important part of the organization. They can feel it, and this will help us as well to retain our skilled volunteers and not losing them. And this is one of the problems we may face if we are not engaging them in a good way. Like finally, I would like to mention that prior to transitioning into virtual services, we used to follow exactly the same cycle of volunteers recruitment, onboarding, retaining, and even professional development practices. But the difference is that now we have increased the focus on digitalizing our work as we are going paperless at the same time, and we are adjusting into the new norm in light of COVID-19. So that's all. I'm done with the presentation. Now the floor is yours for any questions. Thank you.
If you have questions for either Adrian or Mason, feel free to write them in the chat area, or if you feel comfortable, you can raise your hand and ask the questions directly to either one of them. Thank you. So Huda from CCVT is asking, have you found that more or less volunteers are coming forward now?
So, I mean, Mason and I can both answer this the same time, but really there's more volunteers now coming to join Wood Green because simply first, this happens usually with the new year. So people want to do something that they can commit to, New Year's resolution. But secondly, because people have found that they want to do something for the community, they want to do something that's going to support and help the community. So that's what I've found specifically through one of the programs through Community Connections. Mason, if you wanted to respond generally for volunteer services.
Thanks, Adrian. So it's exactly the same thing. I want to echo what you are saying. So yes, we have more volunteers coming to volunteer with us. And also, as I said in my presentation, having more time is a point we can refer to. They have more time to volunteer, I mean. Okay.
I think I see somebody's hand up.
Oh, hi.
Hi,
Good afternoon.
good
Thank you
afternoon.
so much for doing this. It's amazing. I'm from the Waterfront Neighborhood Center. We put on hold our volunteer program and we're planning to relaunch it in the fall. So we have all the policies in place. And I'm started doing all the research, putting the policies together, but I'm trying to handle what's the best way to, when should I start promoting back or for introducing my volunteers back? Is it once I have all my tools in place, like technology, or is it better just to introduce slowly and go from there?
That's a good question. I think, well, with the onset of COVID back in March 2020, it was more of a reactionary type of solution in terms of being able to support the volunteers and talking to the volunteers who already had like tech skills. So for them, that was easy to transition to. In terms of the policies, that took some time actually. Mason and I had worked on those policies for about 3 months, back and forth, working with our project team to make sure it was aligned with what the staff are also practicing. So it's kind of tricky in that sense because the organization still needs the services from these volunteers. And so we just had to make sure that everybody was safe. We provided with them with, the full PPE and according to the program needs, depending on what they were doing. So I think it depends on what you're doing. Is it more of like, we still have volunteers who are doing in-person activity. And so that's also another, another case for us to provide solutions for, because they have to be well protected. So it's kind of a balancing act in that sense. I hope I answered your question, but we really just kind of did everything in parallel and just tried to support the volunteers as best as we could and tried to provide the training and ongoing conversations with them just to make sure that they're comfortable either getting out into the community or providing services virtually.
Right. Thank you.
I can see a question in the chat box. Someone, Natasha, is asking what's the application process for new volunteers at Wood Green and what background checks are required. That's a good question. I will answer that, Adrian, because I'm working directly with the volunteers in this process, throughout this process. So first they need to apply online using Visas link. It's an application, online application. And then we go through the other steps like contacting the references. But before that, I will talk about the background checks. Usually we are using the vulnerable sector screening, which is done through Toronto Police or any police department in the area the volunteer is living. However, during COVID-19, we changed a bit. So it depends on the program. Most of the programs which were transitioned into online services, we are doing the background check through Sterling, which is the basic criminal records. And we accept that as they are not doing any direct contact with the clients. But for specific programs like the medical escorts or the maison ways, they are still in contact, in person contact with the clients. So we are still doing the VSS, the vulnerable sector screening. And usually we are in good relation with Toronto Police, so we try to facilitate our work through doing. They are now accepting electronic signatures. Usually they weren't accepting that. Now they are doing that, and they are processing the applications faster than usual. It used to take 3 to 4 weeks. Now it takes maybe 1 week or maximum 2 weeks. After that, we are going through the volunteer reference check. We are contacting two references. After they are done with everything, we are adding them into the LinkedIn Learning to start their orientation process. I hope I answered your question. Thanks. Okay. Any more questions?
So I just saw a
There's
question.
yeah,
Oh, go ahead,
there's-
Adriana.
Sorry. So Yakin from YMCA Newcomer Information Center is asking what kind of virtual activities are good for volunteers to run. How does Wood Green monitor these activities by volunteers?
Sure. So I can answer some of that, and then Mason, if she has any input. So it really depends on what virtual activities, or depending on the client group that you're working with as well. However, throughout the program areas within Wood Green, virtual activities that are being run, for example, if it's in a professional environment, that it would be workshops that are, customized for that, like whether it be mentoring or networking events, because we still need to engage internationally trained professionals with employers. If it's, for example, our seniors program, they have volunteers who have engaged the seniors virtually as well, where they do exercise programs and other fun activities. And then we also have the homework club, where they work with youth, newcomer youth, and they provide homework support with regards to math, science, and English. And really, I think it's also just making sure that obviously it's what the clients are looking for. So through a lot of surveys and also through discussions with the clients, we're always trying to get feedback from them to ensure we're providing the right services. And the other part to your question was, how do we monitor the activities run by volunteers? So I can say for some specific programs, there's usually a coordinator that is present during the activities, because they need to monitor the chat, and they also need to, they can also put on their surveys for the clients to respond to. And so I know that's one of the best practices to help monitor that type of piece, those types of activities. But also, as you know, if you do utilize MS Teams, you can look at the chat function at the end of the activity, and it'll show you who's participated in the actual programming.
I just want to add a point here, Adrian, so regards to monitoring the activities running by volunteers. Also, I can refer again to VSIS, because now when the program coordinators are using VSIS more, so they are either inserting their hours to credit their hours they are doing into VSIS, or the volunteers themselves, they are signing up for shifts. So this is another way to monitor the activities they are doing. And I have also to emphasize on highlighting the role the program coordinators are doing. So it's them who are managing their volunteers and following up on every single activity they are doing. And this is also a good way to monitor. So from my side, if I want to know how many hours each volunteer is doing per month, I can easily generate a report from VSIS, and so I can, I have this cooperation with the coordinators, and we trust each other that they are inserting the hours correctly. So maybe this is another way to monitor the activities.
Thank you, Mason. And there is another question from Danielle Benton. So you mentioned creating a volunteer community space to keep people engaged. What platform or platforms do you use?
So Mason, if you want to respond to that.
Oh yeah, actually we are still in the stage of brainstorming to create this community. We are now creating the communication plan, but we have some ideas. First, we were thinking of creating specific page on LinkedIn for volunteers, and we name it Wood Green Volunteer Services. It's much easier for them, like a Facebook page. They can communicate, send messages, post whatever they want, go into groups, etc. Also, we thought of the visas. We have to look into visas if they have any platform or any place for the volunteers to create as well, to allow them having this community. That's what we have in mind. I don't know if Adrian, you can add to what I'm saying.
Sure, Mason. I think also just to note that MS Teams actually has been working well for us so far, and that's where we've been receiving the feedback, having these meetings, these focus groups, and even through orientation sessions that Mason has provided, we really have been able to create a better community for the volunteers to meet one another, to see each other's faces, and to feel like they're part of something. So I think that's been our first step. And then also on the website is just sharing with them, why volunteers get involved with our program, testimonials. And then again, like Mason had alluded during the presentation, the cross-pollination of how we can create more of a community, because volunteers want to know not just what's happening in the program they're part of, but they want to know what's happening throughout the whole organization. And I think that that's really important.
Right.
So there's no more questions so far. So I'm not sure, Adrian or Mason, if you have any final thoughts today, so we could wrap up this section of today's webinar.
No, just wanted to say thank you to everyone for being engaged in the conversation. And there's been some great questions that have been brought up, but also through the polling, it's really great as well to see the percentage of organizations who are engaged with the volunteers, the percentage of organizations who already created policies. And so I think it's important that the conversation continues so that, we can all kind of share that knowledge and that experience amongst ourselves to really help move forward organizations, and not even just really support the volunteers that give their time to us on a daily basis. Mason?
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. I can't add more to what Adrian said. I just want to thank everyone, especially Jessie and Adriana, for facilitating this session. It was wonderful, and it was really great to meet all of you. And I wish you stay safe and have a happy sunny day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you both for all that information. And I'm going to pass it over now to our next presenter, to Huda. So just bear with me here while I share the presentation. Okay, Huda, so take it away, and I'll remind you to unmute yourself if you already haven't. Thanks.
I already have. If we can go to the next slide. Thank you ever so much, everyone, for being here. And thank you very much for the Toronto South LIP for inviting CCVT to be here. We are the Canadian Centre for Victims of Torture. My name is Huda Bukhari. I am the Community Engagement Manager. We have a team of 3 who work within our Community Engagement Manager from within the computer program runs. Thank you, Jessie. The agenda, I'll introduce you a little bit to CCVT, then talk about CCVT clients, and then talk about the impact of COVID on the clients, and how we deliver and engage virtual both services and programming, and then the volunteer program and how we engage them, and then how we provide digital boundaries, and then how we keep the volunteers engaged, and then we'll have the Q&A. Thank you. We are a community-based not-for-profit that provides assistance to victims of violence, of trauma, of war, genocide, and crimes against humanity. And we help them through 5 locations across the city of Toronto with a team of counselors, trauma counselors, mental health counselors, and a medical team that comes into our office on a weekly basis. Thank you, Jessie. So as I said, we have mental health services, we have settlement services, we have children and youth services, community engagement services, and public education services, which also falls under the community engagement program. Jessie, thank you. So COVID and its impact on the clients, and therefore with the volunteers that help our clients. And I really have to take our hats off to our volunteers. And that was one of the questions I asked Wood Green, only because we've seen a surge of volunteers come in to assist us ever since COVID. They're home more, they have more time. And so there was a surge in volunteering with CCBT. But COVID has had very difficult impact on our clients. Many of them had no social media experience. Since we are still about 98% working virtually, we do not have an open office where clients can come in. We've been basically closed since March, but we are all working virtually. And our clients didn't have any information and or barriers to information in regards to COVID, what to do, where to go get testing, what does it mean to be locked in. They didn't have access to computers, laptops, or iPhones. They were isolated, specifically our senior clients. And since all of our clients experienced trauma, one way or the other, their anxiety and their depression just skyrocketed. And that exacerbated triggers of pre-existing PTSD conditions. And those who were working in small shops, grocery stores, gas stations lost their jobs, and so they were not able to work, and therefore were in closed spaces, which really did not help their mental health. Some of them were evicted from their housing and or some of the shelters. And then many of them were waiting for their family members to come from to Canada, as they'd put in some of the paperwork, and of course airlines were delayed and the whole process was delayed, which also exacerbated their anxiety. So those are our clients and whom we help. Next one, Jessie. So we help about approximately 3,000 clients a year. And initially we started, the counselors started talking to the clients via telephones and emails. And later, all the staff at the agency were afforded laptops, office laptops to use. And our phone system was changed so that the clients and all the volunteers will not have access to our personal phone numbers to voice over internet phones. And we work around the volunteer availability. So we've set up links, Zoom links, because we primarily work with Zoom to share with the volunteers matches, with the befrienders, with the tutors, with the doctors, and with the staff. We send appointments. We have found through this COVID period that calling and talking to a volunteer personally works a lot better than connecting with them via our database. We have a very good database that we use, but picking up that phone and making that personal connection on the phone works a lot better with our volunteers. And Jessie, the next thing. So our volunteer program, the volunteers put in an application through our website that comes into our database. We provide interviews, and they on the phone, and then they'll have to sign all these documents, such as confidentiality, such as providing their VSSs, the vulnerable sector checks. All of that is put into the database. And then there's an orientation session that is provided to the volunteers where we talk about CCBT, we talk about trauma, specifically trauma, how to be around and provide services to survivors of torture. And then we place the volunteers as per their interests and or their experience. And then we provide trainings as well. Specifically, a lot of our volunteers request trainings on trauma. So we pull on our medical team and they provide training on that as well. One of our doctors also provides training on interpreting for victims of torture. And then we solicit feedback from the volunteers. So we hear back from them quite often. Ismail, my colleague, is here in attendance today, so I may ask him some questions as we go back and forth. Thank you for being here, Ismail. Okay, Jazzy, the next one. To date, we have had about 210 committed and very active volunteers that have provided us with 3,136 hours or so. Our volunteers provide interpretation for us. Many of our volunteers are befrienders, which is when we do matching on one-on-one between a volunteer and a survivor. They take part in our citizenship classes, English conversation classes, homework club sessions. They are presentation assistants, they are research assistants, they are youth mentors, they help out in the youth program. So they do quite a bit of work at the agency. They've also started assisting the clients who are in need of setting up their computers. We have been helping through the program, but the program staff, though, has been helping clients acquire refurbished computers. So the volunteers will then take over and help the clients in their own language how to set up their computers. As well, our volunteers provide tax clinic sessions for our clients, and the tax season is going to begin at the end of the month, and it goes on until May, the end of May. So we have our volunteers providing assistance there as well. Jazzy? So how do we keep our volunteers engaged with us? What drives the volunteer program within the community engagement program is the volunteer advisory committee. So we've set up an advisory committee that is chaired by one of our board members, our executive director, volunteers, and community engagement staff. We meet on every 6 weeks or so. We come together and we talk about the volunteer program and what needs to happen to it. We bring out the surveys and the feedback that we have received, and then we put our minds together on how to make it better, or what direction it needs to go for that particular year. We match volunteers with the interests that they have. For example, we have a volunteer who's great in yoga, for example, and she wanted to set up some yoga sessions for our female clients. We were able to put that together. We have volunteers who just want to be mentors, and so we provide them with mentorship training and match them with the clients. We do frequent feedback and check-ins. For example, our befrienders have their own account, internet account, where they go in and they talk to each other in regards to some issues that they may have within the befriender program, and it's basically peer-to-peer sort of support within that group. We also have a newsletter that goes out quarterly, and it's all virtual now. We provide many workshops specifically the trauma workshops that our volunteers request. And for those, we not only use and utilize our medical teams, but we also invite professors from the universities to come in and talk about some of the research that they have done. The last one we did was late this summer, where Carleton University professors came in to talk to our volunteer base. But then as well, we provide direct trainings to address the befrienders, for example, the interpreters, and we bring in as well professionals to come in and put forth that training, and or we bring a befriender who's been with us, for example, since 1989 to come in and talk about his experiences in all the years that he's been a befriender with CCBT. And then through our database, which is called Better Impact, it provides us with reminders in, this particular VSS is expiring. This particular volunteer has a birthday tomorrow. It's a reminder, so we check in with the volunteer. It also provides us with the ability to enable us to run reports for the volunteers to go in and input their own hours should they wish, which will then only be accepted if we click and say accept, because we know it's happening. It provides us a tool through which to communicate with all of our volunteers at the same time. And so we keep in touch with them through Better Impact. Jazzy? We also talk to our volunteers in regards to digital boundaries, and we let them know that when they're doing interpretation, for example, or befriending or acting as one-on-one tutors or homework club assistants, they need to know that the experience of the individuals or the survivors is as individual as themselves, that we need to let the survivors control the telling, and they need to respect their timing. They need to avoid presumptions. They recognize their own limits and biases, which is very important, to keep a balance between their needs and that of the survivor, and to remember that they are part of a support network, that we at the Community Engagement Program are there to support them as volunteers. We are their back end. They can access us at any time. They have our they have our phone numbers, our office phone numbers, direct numbers that they can call at any time should they have any issues. And we tell them to never give out their personal phone numbers unless they're befrienders or tutors and they're connecting on one-on-one. And then, excuse me, we set up the Zoom times for them to be able to meet, and we monitor it through there. Jazzy? So that's the end of that. That is my contact. I have my direct phone number at CCBT, my email, and now I'm ready for any question and answer. Thank you, Jazzy.
Hi, everyone. If you have any questions for Huda, please feel free to type it in the chat box. Or if you're comfortable, you can raise your hand and ask Huda your questions directly.
I feel that most of the questions had already been answered earlier, but if you have any specific questions about what CCBT is doing, please let us know.
Lucy has raised her hand, so Lucy, you can go ahead.
It was just to clap. Thanks, to thank her for the presentation.
You're welcome.
I don't see any other questions. So Huda, if you have any final thoughts.
Well, I'd really like to thank everyone. I think we're all Zoom fatigued. We've all been working virtually for quite some time. So I am really thankful that we came together, and I have to thank Jazzy and his team for putting this together. Should you have any question that comes up at 11 p.m., as it does every night for me, please drop me an email and I'll be able to address it then.
Great, thank you so much. So as we close today, I'm just sharing a very short evaluation that we hope that you can complete as we're wrapping up. So I've just sent the link into the chat box. Please do complete that. It's very short, gives us feedback of what we can improve on. And also I want to again give a huge thanks to our presenters, to Adrienne, Maysam, and Huda, who took the time to share their knowledge with us today. A big thank you also to Adriana and Ophelia for your help with the presentations and the questions. We really hope that this has been a beneficial space of learning and support. And also, again, really want to acknowledge the hard work that you're all doing in your respective organizations to ensure that those whose needs are otherwise going unmet are being supported. So again, and lastly, we'll be sharing the slides by email with everyone today. And then we'll also have the recording of today's session available on the Toronto South LIP website in the coming weeks. So we hope you enjoy your day and have a great weekend.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.